The voice in your head saying that wouldn't be right or what would others think? Meanwhile, you watched as someone less constrained by these thoughts moved forward and claimed the prize. This pattern has likely repeated throughout your life, leaving you wondering if your moral compass is actually pointing you toward failure. Nietzsche would argue this isn't your imagination. The internal restraints you feel, guilt, empathy, concern for fairness, were designed to keep you in line, not to help you succeed. What if your moral framework isn't a guide to excellence, but a cage built to contain it? If that hit home, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives that challenge the way you think. Throughout history, a disturbing pattern emerges when we examine those who achieved extraordinary success and power. From Alexander the Great to Genghis Khan, from Napoleon to modern corporate titans, the path to greatness seems consistently marked by a troubling moral flexibility. Consider how many conquering emperors built magnificent civilizations through brutal campaigns that destroyed countless lives. The Roman Empire, celebrated for its architectural and governmental innovations, expanded through systematic conquest and enslavement. Even figures we venerate in business often climbed hierarchies by exploiting others, breaking promises, or manipulating systems to their advantage. This pattern extends beyond isolated examples. The corporate landscape provides particularly striking illustrations. Studies of executive behavior reveal that those who reach the highest echelons often score notably higher on assessments of narcissistic traits and lower on conventional measures of empathy. Take Standard Oil and Amazon, companies that transformed entire industries through practices prioritizing domination over compassion. Their founders became icons of success precisely because they operated with fewer moral constraints than their competitors. What makes this pattern so unsettling is the cognitive dissonance it creates. From childhood, we're taught that goodness leads to success, that honesty, fairness, and kindness pave the road to achievement. Yet reality presents us with contradictory evidence. The most celebrated winners in our society often display precisely the traits our moral teachings warn against. They prioritize results over relationships, strategic advantage over shared prosperity, and personal ambition over collective welfare. And rather than facing consequences, they enjoy the fruits of their approach. The conventional narrative attempts to resolve this contradiction by suggesting that moral compromise represents merely a temporary advantage, that ethical transgressions eventually result in downfall. We comfort ourselves with stories of corrupt executives facing justice or ruthless leaders, ultimately meeting tragic ends. But historical evidence suggests otherwise. Many individuals who systematically violated conventional moral boundaries enjoyed lifelong success, died peacefully surrounded by wealth and admiration, and left enduring legacies. This contradiction forces an uncomfortable question. Is our understanding of morality fundamentally flawed? When we observe the actual patterns of achievement across domains and throughout history, the evidence suggests that conventional moral frameworks may function less as guides to success and more as constraints upon it. Our reluctance to acknowledge this pattern stems from a deep psychological need, the just world hypothesis. We desperately want to believe we inhabit a moral universe where goodness receives reward and evil faces punishment. It becomes almost unbearable to consider that our moral intuitions might be disconnected from the mechanisms that distribute power and success. Nietzsche recognized this uncomfortable truth. He suggested our conventional moral frameworks weren't designed to produce excellence, but rather to constrain the ambitions of exceptional individuals. In his view, traditional morality emerged from the psychological needs of those who lacked power, a mechanism for controlling those who might otherwise dominate. This perspective transforms how we understand the relationship between morality and success. The most ambitious individuals in any domain have recognized that conventional moral constraints represent obstacles rather than guides. They make decisions others find unthinkable, not because they lack moral awareness, but because they operate according to different priorities: achievement over approval, results over relationships, legacy over likability. But what if this raises an even deeper question? If conventional morality constrains rather than enables greatness, where did our moral frameworks originate, and what purpose do they truly serve in human societies? The moral constraints we hold dear didn't materialize from nowhere. They weren't inscribed in the fabric of the universe or handed down from divine sources. According to Nietzsche, these constraints evolved from specific historical conditions where power dynamics shaped societies and the very concept of right and wrong. Consider two ancient civilizations, one of conquerors with abundant resources, the other struggling under occupation with limited means of resistance. Would they develop identical notions of virtue? The answer, Nietzsche argued, reveals the true origin of our moral frameworks. Nietzsche's genealogical investigation of morality challenged the fundamental assumption that our values reflect objective truths about goodness. Instead, he proposed that morality emerges from historical power struggles between fundamentally different types of people. What we often mistake for universal ethics actually represents two competing moral systems that develop to serve entirely different psychological needs, what he termed master morality and slave morality. Master morality originated among the powerful, rulers, nobles, and conquerors throughout history. Like sculptors shaping raw marble into their vision, these dominant figures created values that celebrated strength, ambition, and excellence. They determined good based on what enhanced their power and capacity for greatness. Pride, assertiveness, and judging actions by consequences rather than intentions became their virtues. In this framework, power enabled the creation of values and reshaping of the world according to one's vision. Slave morality emerged as a psychological adaptation among those lacking power. Unable to directly challenge oppressors, the powerless developed a revolutionary inversion of values. They transformed their weakness into moral superiority, recasting submission as virtue. Where masters valued achievement, slaves elevated suffering. Where the powerful embraced self-assertion, the powerless praised self-sacrifice. This moral framework provided dignity to those who couldn't compete in terms of power by suggesting their suffering made them morally superior. The Battle of Alesia in 52 BCE offers a striking historical example of these competing moralities. Caesar's Roman legions, embodying master morality, celebrated their strategic dominance and military prowess. Meanwhile, the defeated Gallic tribes, under Vercingetorix's leadership, transformed their surrender into a story of noble sacrifice and moral righteousness, the hallmark of slave morality. The revolutionary aspect of slave morality was its transformation of powerlessness from a condition to overcome into a virtue to celebrate. Through what Nietzsche called ressentiment, the powerless condemned traits that enabled domination. Physical strength became brutishness. Strategic thinking became manipulation. This inversion created psychological weapons, guilt, sin, shame, that could control those who couldn't be defeated through direct confrontation. This moral reversal didn't merely provide comfort, it fundamentally altered human civilization. By establishing concepts like equality and universal rights, slave morality created a framework that constrained the naturally dominant. The powerful internalized limitations through concepts like guilt and conscience, the lion taught to feel ashamed of its claws. This historical development bridges directly to our modern condition, which Nietzsche argued operates predominantly on slave morality principles. Our cultural narratives, from religious traditions to films, celebrate the humble triumphing over the proud. We've internalized the belief that asserting greatness is arrogant and self-sacrifice is the highest virtue. The implications are profound. Our moral frameworks aren't objective truths, but psychological adaptations to power positions. Slave morality wasn't designed for flourishing, but specifically to constrain the naturally dominant. This explains why morality often punishes ambition while rewarding mediocrity disguised as virtue. This perspective reveals why extraordinary achievers seem to operate by different rules. They haven't abandoned morality. They've transcended a specific framework designed precisely to limit their potential. What conventional morality labels ruthlessness might represent liberation from constraints that prevent most from pursuing ambitions with singular focus. Those who rise to positions of influence often display a particular psychological profile that both fascinates and disturbs us. The uncomfortable truth is that certain brain structures associated with reduced emotional sensitivity create decisive advantages in competitive environments, allowing some individuals to act immediately and decisively while the morally constrained remain paralyzed by considerations others simply don't experience. Modern neuroscience illuminates what philosophers like Nietzsche have long suspected. Traits we culturally denounce as flaws represent biological adaptations suited for status acquisition. Brain studies show successful competitors process emotions differently, with decreased activity in empathy regions and increased activity in decision-making areas. This biological reality transforms our understanding of success. Reduced empathy and diminished guilt aren't developmental failures, but specialized adaptations removing internal obstacles to achievement. The capacity to make difficult decisions without emotional interference, controlled ruthlessness, enables efficient navigation of competitive landscapes. Imagine a chess grandmaster who, seeing her opponent's vulnerability, executes a devastating sacrifice that removes a crucial defender. While others might hesitate, feeling empathic concern about crushing their opponent's hopes, she calculates the position's cold reality and acts decisively. This same decisive clarity operates throughout competitive domains. When opportunities arise, those with reduced empathic sensitivity act immediately, while others remain locked in moral deliberation. Their minds calculate optimal strategies rather than processing emotional implications. In high-stakes environments, hesitation becomes a critical liability. Those requiring internal permission before acting find themselves perpetually behind competitors who face no such resistance. The ability to make unpopular decisions without emotional turmoil represents a competitive edge that compounds over time. Evolution has selected for success under specific conditions, not virtue. Throughout history, acquiring and maintaining status directly impacted reproductive success and resource acquisition. Traits facilitating this process were preserved because they worked regardless of our moral categories. This creates an evolutionary paradox. Traits potentially undermining group cohesion persist because they benefit individuals. The ruthless individual may damage collective welfare yet personally thrive, maintaining these characteristics in our gene pool despite their potentially destructive social impacts. The distinction between mindless and controlled ruthlessness proves crucial. Mindless ruthlessness destroys without purpose, while controlled ruthlessness makes difficult choices without hesitation. Those achieving lasting power exhibit strategic decisiveness, the capacity to pursue goals with determination while maintaining enough social awareness to secure their position. What conventional morality labels as defects, reduced fear, sensitivity, diminished social anxiety, heightened self-interest, might instead be specialized adaptations removing friction between desire and action. While morally constrained individuals experience conflict between ambition and restraint, those with these traits pursue goals with singular focus. Research shows these individuals maintain focus on long-term objectives without emotional distractions. Their reduced sensitivity to rejection allows them to weather criticism that would devastate others. Their diminished fear enables risk-taking others avoid. These advantages create a formidable template for achievement. This perspective reveals a profound tension in human societies. Traits enabling individual advancement may threaten collective welfare. The psychological characteristics helping certain individuals efficiently climb hierarchies can undermine social cooperation. Yet these traits persist precisely because they work. The most successful competitors understand moral frameworks well enough to navigate them, yet experience reduced internal constraint. This allows them to project adherence to norms while strategically violating them when advantageous. They aren't devoid of moral understanding. They experience moral considerations as optional guidelines rather than binding constraints. Society maintains a curious paradox that few acknowledge openly. We teach our children that kindness leads to success while simultaneously elevating those who display dominance and calculated self-interest. What if our deepest cultural narratives about virtue and reward are actually designed to preserve the very power structures they claim to transcend? Consider the cultural stories we consume daily. From childhood fairy tales to Hollywood blockbusters, we encounter narratives where the humble hero triumphs over the selfish villain. The kind-hearted protagonist endures hardship but ultimately achieves vindication while the antagonist faces karmic justice. These stories establish a seemingly straightforward equation. Virtue leads to reward, vice to punishment. Yet reality consistently contradicts this framework. Look at who occupies positions of genuine influence in our institutions. The correlation between conventional virtue and exceptional success grows increasingly tenuous as you ascend hierarchical structures. The individual who refuses to step on others often remains on the bottom rung, their moral integrity intact, but their ambitions unrealized. Meanwhile, those making difficult decisions, prioritizing objectives over individuals, continue their ascent. This contradiction creates a profound double bind. We internalize one set of explicit rules while observing the effectiveness of an entirely different implicit playbook. Consider recent tech CEOs celebrated for innovation while employing ruthless competitive tactics, or politicians who maintain public compassion narratives while strategically eliminating opposition through calculated maneuvers. The discrepancy between what we publicly celebrate and what we implicitly reward serves a sophisticated social function. Society achieves two seemingly incompatible goals simultaneously: promoting values that enhance group cohesion, cooperation, fairness, self-restraint, while tacitly rewarding behaviors that maintain existing power distributions and hierarchical structures. This arrangement constitutes what Nietzsche might have recognized as a noble lie, the collective fiction that goodness inevitably leads to success. We sustain this illusion through a shared psychological need to believe in a just world. The alternative, acknowledging that virtue and reward often diverge, threatens our sense of meaning and undermines social cohesion. The persistence of this illusion creates advantages for those who recognize its nature. Successful individuals within competitive domains project adherence to conventional values publicly while operating according to power principles privately.